That gives me time to introduce Philippe Bugnon. He was the chair of the working group working on the CPD framework. This in close collaboration with also, obviously, the person in charge in Brussels. And this was because this, as Susanna explained, was only a very brief half a page in the education and framework document as we know it, but will have get much more attention there. So this is really a very nice opportunity to see what will appear in the framework document on CPD recognition in Europe. So the floor is yours, Philippe.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah, perfect. And this. Okay, thank you very much. And I will present to you now the work of this working group on CPD framework. It was not an easy task. So Jan Bas didn't mention this when he asked me if I want to do this job, but I would like to say that I like challenges, and it was a very huge challenge. So first, I would like to thank my working group. So Sabine, Sarah, Angela, Ivo, and Brun, because it was not really easy to mention, and we start from the scratch. And the question was how we can provide to the different member states a framework that will allow free movement of scientists. So we were not alone because we had also to ask and deal with other key persons in the working group. So I was contacted by the FELASA task force who revised the CPD publication of FELASA to be sure that we are in line and not in conflict with what we will produce and what they will publish. Also with Susanna, many times, because to be sure that I'm a Swiss person, so I'm not a specialist in EU directive, to ensure that we will not write something which cannot be accepted by the member state because it's contradicted the EU directive. And also with the ENT framework, because they work on the same field, but not on CPD especially on CPD. And I was in one of these meetings to ensure that we are also in line. It works. So the goal is when you do a continuing education, your goal is that this education will provide you new knowledge, new skills, but also that this can be recognized for you in your institution, and also if you move to another country, in the other country. And for this, we need a framework, and this will allow free movement. So you can do your education in Spain, then move to the Netherlands, and this education should be also recognized in the Netherlands and not start from the beginning. This already in place for the EU function, and the goal was also to provide something for the CPD. Now, let's see what CPD means, these three letters. Very important because there is a lot of information in these three letters. The first one is continuous, and this means it's a never-end story in a positive sense, not in a negative sense. So you will continue to have this education to improve your knowledge, to maintain first and to develop and improve your knowledge, to ensure that you can do the job in the professional way. And this is what was already mentioned by Susanna, and also by Raphael today. We have a responsibility towards the society. We have to justify the use of animals, but we have also to do this in the proper way, a professional way. And the last is development. In this field, it's really not stable. We have new improvement, new refinement. I will give you perhaps something you don't know. In Switzerland, we changed the law at the beginning of the year, and now the tool and handling, which was considered as a refinement, is now considered as state of the art. We have to do that. So we cannot teach this and say it's now like a CPD, because it's no more a refinement that we can teach to people to improve the skills. It's considered as state of the art. And you see, we develop a technique, we improve the technique, and then this becomes state of the art. And then you have new technique and new skills and so on. So it's never, as I mentioned, it's never end story. The challenge was one directive, but 27 member states. And you have also, it was already mentioned, you have the national and sometimes the regional regulation. And in some countries, you have already a system in place for CPD, and in some countries, you have nothing. And the challenge was to propose something that can be acceptable for all member states. So starting with the basic education, this is already, let me say, in the framework. So it's already, the content is already known. You know exactly in which module what you have. And then it was mentioned many times, you have to prove that you are competent for that. For the CPD, we cannot define the content because each person will need another type of CPD. You can have the same function, but you work in another field of research, you do other experimentation with other animals. This means you need a CPD dedicated to your needs. We can only define what can count as CPD, but we cannot define for, in general, these are the CPD for everybody. Then if we see this, in this you have the borderline between basic education and CPD. It was already mentioned. We have to show that we are competent. And if you lose these competencies, then you have to go back to the basic training. Now, what we propose here from the side of CPD, there are two possibilities. You can do 100% really classical CPD when you improve and develop your skills and your knowledge. But we would like also to propose to have 20% of basic training that can count as CPD. I explain you why. It was a discussion we had with the fellows at Task Force. And in my opinion, it's a very good idea. Let me say you are a researcher. You train a technique and you are considered as competent. You were checked and you are competent. And you will have to perform this experiment with animals, but you do not feel really confident to do that. And confidence is very important because this is the way you will perform the experimentation. Technically, it's something, but the confidence is very important. You are still competent, but you would like to repeat this before you go to the animal in your lab and do the experimentation. And for this, you go back to basic training because this part is from basic training. So we like to give the possibility to people when they would like to repeat some part of the basic training to be confident, but still competent, to count this as CPD. Not that they say, okay, if this doesn't count as CPD, I will try myself and see if it works. And also self-learning, especially with skills, it's not probably the best things to do. So we have the possibility to give 20% of the, and why 20%? To avoid that people use only basic training as CPD, because you will know, as no human beings are human beings, and some people will say, okay, I redo my basic training 10 times, then I have my CPDs. So we have to give a limitation in this percentage. Now there are two systems in general. You can have a system based on duration, so number of hours, number of days per hour, per year, per 6 months, and so on. And you can have also system based on credit points, like you have the ECTS in Europe. And now we have to find a way to fit with both systems. So if we propose a framework only based on hours, and in country you have credit points, this member state will say, no way, we have already our system with credit points, we cannot adhere to this. And the contrary is also true. So let's first compare different training types. So what is the difference here? I would like to show you this, that we say it's the same topic, a course on breeding management, on score sheet, in a large audience, like on conference, or in a small group. The topic is the same, the principles are the same, the content of the course is the same, but the acquisition of knowledge is not the same. Here you have perhaps time to ask one question if you have good luck, and here you challenge people with examples, with situation. And by challenging them in this small group, you allow them to better acquire this knowledge, to better use this knowledge later. And these are two types of events that need also to be recognized as very good acquisition of knowledge and a less, I will not say a bad, but a less good acquisition of knowledge. And for this, we say, okay, all systems using credit points are based first on the number of hours. If I have to give for one of my course ECTS, I have first to count how many hours we have. And then you have to adapt this to the type of course we have. If it's a webinar, e-learning with some assessment, or if it's a face-to-face, in small group, in large group. And this is exactly what we have here, what would you propose? You can multiply this number of hours based on the preparation you ask the student to do, the interaction you have, and the assessment. So you can have both, so all, one of them or nothing. And what we propose in this framework is, if you have preparation, this means you ask the student before the course to read paper, to write a report, to prepare material. So you challenge them before they go to the course, and they're better prepared to absorb the knowledge you will give them. Then the interaction. As I mentioned, I show in these two pictures, in a large audience with 200 people, you cannot have the same interaction that if you have only 20 students in a course. And the last is assessment. You can assess them. You can make a classical written exam. You can ask questions orally and so on. And all these different parameters increase the acquisition of knowledge because you challenge them before, during, or after the course. And what we propose is this type of multiplication. I will start with the middle. If you believe that the acquisition of knowledge corresponds to the number of hours, you multiply by 1. This means 10 hours is 10 hours or 10 credit points. If you believe that the acquisition knowledge is lower than the number of hours, typically a huge conference, then you multiply by 0.5, so you divide by 2. And if you have a very good acquisition of knowledge, which is higher than number of hours, you multiply by 2. Some example, so you will be able to read this in the document when it is ready to be disseminated, is 0.5 typically online module dedicated to self-learning without any speaker, without any assessment. So here you will learn something, but the acquisition of knowledge, especially to use this later in your experimentation, is quite low. Or a congress with passive attendance. Nothing, not a criticism against these congresses, but the acquisition of knowledge is lower. Then you multiply by 0.5. This is webinar dedicated to self-learning with assessment. So you know that you will be challenged after the webinar, so you have to learn better to be able to pass this exam or assessment, oral or poster presentation in a last event or a course. And 2 is, to example, and on training to learn new technique. So you will have to also show that you are technically able to do the job, not only to be passive and see what is demonstrated. Also, training to become a trainer. So Eve already mentioned that it's not easy to train somebody. You have to be sure that you are on a good level to be able to transmit your knowledge to another person. So it's also something which have to be recognized. And we also saw that there is also other option to have CPD, especially when you are really highly involved in lab animal science, like in board or committee or working group of the National or International Laboratory Animal Science Association, also member of a journal or reviewer of journal dedicated to lab animal science only, it's clear. When you publish new techniques, or 3R techniques and so on, and also active participation in the work of animal welfare bodies. Again, here we restrict this to 20% because animal welfare body will have, it's a full-time job. So for some of them, so they will have the CPD immediately. So they should also have, or to promote that they have also to go to other courses to learn something new. So we say, okay, 20% is good. 20% in total, not multiplied by the number of tasks you can have. Now there is 2 key persons for this, because now it's how what is the procedure to do that? You have first the staff, the person who will actively work with the animal, or indirectly. And it was already mentioned many times, so the Article 23 mentioned this, so the staff must be adequately educated and trained. And we named these persons Article 24, 1C person NTCO, because it's a long word. So the name, trained, and competency officer. And this person is responsible, or so it can be one or many persons, responsible for ensuring that the staff is continually trained. So if you have these two persons together, they can do the job. The staff will have an impact, indirect or indirect, on the welfare of the animals. So this person need a specific CPD for this role. And the NTCO, or the Article 24 1C person, is responsible to ensure that the staff is continually trained. So this means a regular evaluation of the person to see what can be for you specifically the next CPD and what you already did. And for this, we propose a portfolio. And this is a way for everybody in this field to prove that I did this CPD. If I move to another institution, if I move to another country, another region, I take this with me, it was evaluated, and I can prove I did this job. For us, when we have people coming from abroad and they say, okay, we have this basic education or this continuing education, the only way to evaluate this is a certificate. And sometimes you have almost nothing written on certificate. You have the name, the date, a title for a course, and nothing else. With this, it's impossible. You say, okay, this person did something, but you don't know what. So the portfolio is at three parts. The first part, before one slide. So I already mentioned, so these two persons, the NTCO and the staff, should regularly meet. It can be yearly, it can be decided by another way, to see what was already done and what will be done in the next year or next month. And the portfolio is like this. What we propose is first to have on this page, the piece of paper, what is the role, the task, and the function of this person. To have an overview about what, because this is the basics to develop a plan for the next CPD. What this person already done with all information, and this is really the certificate for everything done in a certain time period. And also, what should be done in the next time. And the best person to do that, it's written in the EU directive, is this Article 24 1C person. We have to ensure that the staff is continually trained. And this is what we'll propose. So the next step will be, because this work is not completely finished, we will have now to see how the NCP and the observer will react to this and see if we have to adapt this framework or not to ensure that we will be able to propose this. And again, there is two key points. To be sure that by this way, we can also promote good CPD to reduce the impact on the animals, and for the person to be able to prove I did this job. I don't have to start again if I move to another position or another country or another institution. Okay, this was my last slide.